Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stated, "I am happy to join you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration of freedom in the history of our nation. 5 score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a beginning light of hope for millions of Negro slaves whose lives had been seared by the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But now, 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro still lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself an exile in his own land. And so we have come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which all men would fall heir. This note was a promise to all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred commitment, America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check that has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great pulse of opportunity of our nation. And so we have come here today to cash this check, a check that upon demand will give us the riches of freedom and the securities of justice. We have all gathered at this hallowed place to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. Now is not the time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualization. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all God's children. It would be fatal for our nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an ending but a beginning. And for those of you who hope that the Negro is just going off steam and will soon be content, or in for a rude awakening if America continues business as usual, there will be neither rest nor tranquility until the Negro has full citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the very foundations of this nation until that bright day of justice emerges. But there is something I must say to my people who stand at the one threshold that leads to the palace of justice. In the process of taking our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degrade into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead to a distrust of our white people. For many of our white brothers here today are evidence that our destiny is tied to their destiny. We also realize that our freedom is inextricably bound to their freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must pledge to always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who would ask the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro is a victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot find lodging in the hotels of our highways and the motels of our cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the basic mobility of the Negro is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We cannot be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has no reason for which to vote. No, we cannot, we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that many of you have come here today through great trials and tribulations. Some have come fresh from narrow jail cells. And some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom has left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggering from the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work in the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow, some way, these conditions can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair, I say to you today, my friend. And though we must face the difficulties